This morning, we're going to be looking into the book of Acts. And a couple days ago, I filmed a video and stuck it up on the Facebook page for the Porch. And I said that the book of Acts, chapter 12, it plays out a lot like a movie because when I read it, that's what I see. Are there any movie fans or buffs in here? Yeah, a few of them. One, two, three. Okay, there's a few. Maybe you're somebody who doesn't care about movies. Maybe you like to read. Any readers in here? Good. I'm glad there's readers in here. Well, it doesn't matter if you like to read or if you like to watch movies. This chapter covers a lot of different genres. Action, adventure, drama. There's even comedy in there. And what's greatest about it, it's even got romance. Yeah, you wouldn't first notice that as you read through this chapter, but it's there, and we're going to cover that today. But like a movie, there's usually a title. And today, the title of our movie, if you want to look at it as that, is Expect the Unexpected. Expect the unexpected. We need to learn to expect the unexpected, don't we? It's important. It kind of keeps us a little level. It keeps us from being knocked on our feet when the unexpected comes along because we've been expecting it, right? But we're going to look, like I said, at Acts chapter 12. So if you're not there already, go ahead and turn there. My plan is not to keep you all day long, but we're going to cover the entire chapter. Okay? As we go through here today, there's three things that jump out at me and that I hope that you'll begin to see as we go through here as well. And first, that's that God sees our troubles. He does. Anybody in trouble? No? Nobody's in trouble this morning? Good. Got some honesty in here. God also hears our prayers. He does. If you don't believe that, I hope you begin to believe that because He does. And not only does He hear our prayers, but God fights our battles. So when we find ourselves in trouble, when we find ourselves in those battles, listen, God's going to take care of it. He promises us that He will do that. And then He'll carry us like we were just singing. So that's what we're going to look at today if you're keeping notes. There's a graphic up here. You can hopefully read that and follow along with us. But as we begin to expect the unexpected this morning, we'll begin with verse 1. Now, verse 1 of chapter 12 says this, "Now about that time, Herod the king stretched forth his hands to vex certain of the church." Now it says, now about that time. What time? Well, the time was about 44 AD. Right? So the church is just starting to get going. Jesus hasn't been gone that long. And it's in its infancy, the church is. And already they've got enemies. Already they're finding themselves in trouble. It says that they find themselves in trouble because this guy Herod, the king. Now we've heard about Herod before, haven't we? Well, the Herod you're thinking of probably isn't this Herod. You see, there was lots of Herods. Herod wasn't a name as much as it was a title. And you might remember that when Jesus was newly born, what happened? Well, there was another Herod. There was Herod the Great, and he wanted all the babies to be killed. Y'all remember that? Well, this was this guy, or Herod the Great was this guy's grandpa. Okay? This is Herod Agrippa the First. That's who we're studying about today. And Herod Agrippa the First, he was a guy who was, well, I'd say he was complicated. He was a man that was really stuck between two worlds. He was large and he was in charge. He had friends in high places. His father, his grandfather, like I said, was Herod the Great. And then, as he was a boy, Herod Agrippa the First, the guy we're reading about here, he was sent off to live in Rome, to grow up in Rome. So he wasn't killed by his own family. Can you imagine that? But one of the guys that he grew up with was a pretty famous guy, especially during this time. Emperor Caligula. Anybody hear of him? He was crazy. He was a madman. He was a lunatic and a tyrant. He was evil. And this was one of the guys he grew up with. Now, don't we usually become the people we hang out with? That's a sad reality, but that's reality. And that's what happened to Herod. But he always had an affinity for the Jewish people, though. But because he had grown up and his family was close with Rome, he was being their friend, willing to do things for them, well, they were willing to scratch his back as well. And so they said, look, we're going to make you a king. And we're going to give you all of that area there, and you're going to get to go, and you're going to get to be the king. So here he is referred not to as Herod the Great as his grandpa was, but he's Herod the king. And he has made a decision he's going to attack the church. Now, why would he do that? Well, he knew that the Jews were not fond of this new religion coming along, this new faith that was coming along, these people that were talking about a way to God that was different than theirs. Remember, Christianity was in its infancy. It was new. And so he says, I'm going to make it my mission to go after them, because it makes the Jews happy if I do. That's what's going to happen. And so he's going about and he's beginning to persecute them, to give them a hard time, to give the church trouble. That's what we see right there in verse 1. And he stretched forth his hands. He was exercising his authority. Verse 2 says, and he killed James, the brother of John, with the sword. Now this is James, the son of Zebedee. Anybody remember James, the son of Zebedee? He was one of the first disciples, one of the first followers of Christ. He had a brother named John. At one time, their mother wanted them to be pretty special. She thought that they were pretty special. And so she goes to Jesus on their behalf. I'm sure they probably wanted to, but they didn't have the guts, maybe. And so mom goes to Jesus and says, Lord, when your kingdom comes, how about do something special for my boys? How about set one on your left and one on your right? And Jesus said, well, do you guys think that you could drink from the same cup that I can? And they said, oh, yeah, we could do that. He said, well, that's good, because it's going to happen. You will indeed drink from the same cup that I do. It's not going to be today, but you will. You're going to go through the same things. And they really do. James is now being killed, and we see here that he is the first of the 12 disciples that is being killed. What do we know about John? John was the last one to die, wasn't he? So these two boys, they were special. They were the bookends on our disciples of their being martyred or their deaths. And so Jesus' words came true, didn't they? But here, James, remember, this is the early church. James is very influential. He's very important to the early church as the church is getting started, and now he's been killed. Now think about this. If a group of soldiers or the police department came in here and grabbed up Pastor Gordon one day and took him off and cut his head off, how that would impact our church. Think about that. Well, that's got to be the same way that the early church was feeling and thinking at this time. They had just lost James. Just because Herod wanted to make some people happy. There was no reason for it, except he wanted to please the people. He was a people pleaser, as we see. And because, in verse 3, because he saw it pleased the Jews, he said, well, that worked out well. The Jews, they like me a lot now, because I'm doing something that they don't have to do. I'm taking care of their enemies, and I'm growing in favor with them. So he said, I'm going to do it again. Verse 3 goes on to say, he proceeded further to take Peter also. He said, it worked out real well. Nobody came against me. Everybody likes me. I got away with it with James. I'm going to cause some more trouble. I'm going to cause some more pain. I'm going to go get Peter. I've heard a lot about this guy, Peter. And now I'm going to go see if he really is a rock. I'm going to go get him. And so he proceeds to take Peter also. And then were the days of unleavened bread. So this is pre-Passover. So just before the Passover, just before Easter, this happens. Now, remember I said that Herod, he had an affinity for the Jews. So much so that he even applied a lot of their teachings to his life. He tried his best to follow their law. He tried his best to honor their holy days and to do everything he could to stay on their good side because he really liked that. Well, so he decides, okay, I could kill Peter right now, but I'm going to wait. I'm going to honor the law. I'm going to wait until after Passover, and then we'll put him to death. As verse 4 says, and when he had apprehended him, he put him in prison and delivered him to 4 quaternions of soldiers to keep him. Now a quaternion was like a squad of soldiers. 4 soldiers made up a quaternion. And so now this is 4 quaternion that have been taken and said, look, you're responsible for taking care of making sure Peter doesn't get away from you. 16 soldiers. They operated in this way, in this quaternion style, because they would, when they were given a task like this, when they were given a mission to go and guard somebody like this, they would break up into shifts. One guy would watch the prisoner while maybe this guy slept, and these 2 guys watched the door if you had 1 quaternion. And then they would rotate like that. Another guy would go to sleep while everybody else was on guard. Well, with 4 quaternion, 4 squads of soldiers, these 16 soldiers, this was a big deal. You didn't do that for just anybody. I mean, Peter, what was so special about him? That 16 guys have to be assigned to watch him, to take care of making sure that he doesn't escape. What was so special about him? There wasn't. Unless you knew history. Unless you knew history. See, he was assigned 16 different soldiers. And they were put in charge of watching, of taking him, to putting him in prison, and to watching him. And the plan was, after Easter, he would bring him out and kill him in order to make the Jews happy. In order to please more people, he would cause more trouble, more pain. That was his plan. But things don't always go according to plan. You see, this is what Herod was expecting to do. But you have to expect the unexpected. 4 quaternion, 16 soldiers. They capture Peter and they take him and they put him in the prison. And as we go into verse 5, we begin to see not only does God see us in our trouble, as the trouble of the early church was very quickly seen by God, and it wasn't ignored. A lot of times when we find ourselves in trouble, we can say, well, God just doesn't see me. Or even, God doesn't care. God sees our trouble. He sees the stuff that we go through. And He does care. He does care. We just have to care also. We have to care about Him. We have to talk to Him. We've got to listen to Him, and we've got to be still and just know that anything that happens is because He wants it to. As long as we're trusting in Him. As long as we're putting our cares on Him, He can be the God of our trouble. And He can take care of us. Verse 5, He hears our prayers. God does. He hears our prayers just like He sees our trouble. And in verse 5, Peter, therefore, was kept in prison. So now they've taken him. The plan is to kill him at another time. And they hauled him off to jail. They've locked him up with 4 quaternions of soldiers. And Peter was kept in prison. But prayer was made without ceasing of the church unto God for what? What were they praying for? for him. That's what it says. For him. They didn't stop praying. They might have learned. You know, a lot of times that we go through something and we're like, wow, I should have been praying about that. Or I should have prayed. But we're not told that they were praying for James. No, James was important just like Peter was. Peter's no more important than James. But he lost his head. And so it got their attention, I'm sure. And they said, you know what? We should probably pray for Peter. We should pray that Peter doesn't lose his head like James. And so they began praying. They learned a lesson. And they kept praying. They didn't stop. Without ceasing, they prayed for him. And verse 6 says, and when Herod would have brought him forth, the same night, Peter, what's it say? He was sleeping. Peter was sleeping. Now, Peter, we know he was pretty good about sleeping, wasn't he? He slept several times. He was asleep in the garden when Jesus asked him to just stay up just for an hour. Just pray with me for an hour. He decided he needed a nap. When else? When else was Peter asleep? Peter was asleep. And now he's asleep again. He was sleeping between two soldiers, bound with two chains, and the keepers before the door kept the prison. So these 16 soldiers that are in charge, well, not only are they just hanging out in the prison watching Peter, but now they're chained to Peter. They're chained to him. They're chained to this hand, this wrist, this wrist. They're chained to each other. You got guards at the doors, guards on the watch outside. They're ready to prevent Peter from escaping. And again, I'm asked, why is Peter so important that they need 16 soldiers to watch him? Remember I said, if you know your history, you'll also understand why Peter was sleeping, how Peter was able to sleep. Because if I was thrown in prison and you came to me and said, John, you're going to be killed tomorrow, as I'm sure these soldiers were doing. I've been a soldier. I know how we talk when we're hanging out with one another, when we're hanging out with prisoners even, and how we rib them and give them a hard time. We tell them about their future, even though we might not know what it is. So I'm sure these guys were doing the same thing. And they're saying, look, you're going to lose your head tomorrow. I'll finally be unchained from you tomorrow. I won't have to drag you around everywhere I go. So they're chained to this guy. But he's not worried about it. He's sleeping, as Peter was good about doing. He was good about it. And he's sleeping peacefully, soundly, even though he's chained to these two men, to these two soldiers in this dark prison. How was he able to do this? Well, we can remember back to John chapter 21. At the end of John, you've got John chapter 21. Jesus has died. Jesus has rose again. Jesus has come to visit his friends, and then Jesus disappears again. And so they said, well, let's go fishing. And they go out and they go fishing, and while they're out there fishing, they're sitting around and they're talking about all the great times they had with Jesus, and boy, we miss him. And all of a sudden, somebody calls them from the shore. And it's Jesus. He said, come on ashore, guys. I'm hungry. Let's eat some breakfast together. So they come ashore and they sit down with Jesus and they have breakfast, and then they begin to have a dialogue. They begin to have a conversation. We know about this conversation that Jesus had with Peter. Peter, do you love me? Feed my sheep. Remember that one? Well, that's this same conversation. And then Jesus looks at Peter and he says, when you were young, somebody had to get you dressed and carry you wherever you went. No, I'm sorry. When you were young, you got yourself dressed and you could go wherever you wanted to. But when you're old, people will dress you and will carry you where you go. Now, Peter at this time was not an old man, but he remembered back to these words of Jesus, I'm sure. He remembered the words, when you are old. And so he could sleep easy. He could sleep peaceful because he was not an old man. He could also remember another time, another event in Acts chapter 5. In Acts chapter 5, all the apostles were rounded up and they were thrown in jail. And guess what? They didn't stay there long. An angel came along and let them go. Peter remembers this. And so it's this type of thing that Peter can look back on and think about, and he can say, you know what? I'm not worried about it. Because while you guys are talking about me being killed tomorrow, I'm expecting the unexpected. I'm expecting that I'm going to walk free tomorrow. I'm expecting that what you have planned for me is not really going to happen. I'm going to go free. And so he can easily go to sleep. And that's where we find Peter. He's sleeping between the two soldiers. And then in verse 7, we begin to see his escape. And it begins with, and behold, the angel of the Lord came upon him, and a light shined in the prison. And he smote Peter on the side and raised him up. Now hold up. He was sleeping peacefully. Are there any hard sleepers in here? So, yeah? Somebody who's hard to wake up? My wife's pointing at me. I guess I'm a hard sleeper. Peter was a really hard sleeper. Not only does somebody come to him, an angel, and now he's standing there as he's sleeping, probably kicking him. Get up, Peter. Hey, it's time to get up. Cock-a-doodle-doo. But he turns the lights on. Anybody able to sleep with the lights on? It's more difficult. Not for Peter. Peter's snoring away. He's sawing some serious logs right now. Snoring away. And that still isn't good enough. He's still not waking up even with the lights on. So then the angel smote him. What does this mean? He hit him. He said, hey, knucklehead, wake up. Get up. Arise quickly. He smote Peter on the side and he raised him up, saying, arise up quickly. And just like that, this wake-up call became serious. Not only was it a wake-up call, it was a freedom's call. That angel was sent there by the Lord because of those prayers. Because of the power of prayer. Because God hears our prayers. What's the very next part of verse 7 say? And his chains fell off from his hands. So not only is he waking him up, but now he's setting him free. It's not the angel. It's the Lord. It's the Lord that is setting him free. And so I got to ask, what are your chains of bondage this morning? Do you have any chains on you? Are you locked up in a prison this morning that you can't escape from? Or you think you can't? Or other people think you can't? Because I could tell you, there's hope. You can get free. People might not be able to see it. The Lord does. And he's got your plan. He's got your angel waiting for him to send to unlock your chains and to set you free. Because God hears our prayers. He does. And so that's what happened here to Peter. Remember, they're praying for Peter. God's listening. And those chains fell off. And verse 8 goes on to say, and the angel said unto him, gird thyself and bind on thy sandals. And then it says, and so he did. And he saith about him, cast thy garment about thee and follow me. And the beginning of verse 9 says, and he went out. So what do we see here? The angel doesn't just show up, turn on the lights, kick him a few times, wake him up. But now he's telling him to do something. You see, I believe God is powerful. I hope that you believe God is powerful. And I believe that God could have set him free without Peter having to do a thing. But sometimes we have a part to play. It doesn't matter how small that part is. Sometimes he still gives us a part to play. And God's planned purpose often requires participation on our part. Even if it's something as small as get up, put your clothes on, and follow me. We're getting out of here. Let's go. Get your shoes on. You've got a part to play. And Peter had a part to play. And it goes on to say, in verse 9, and he went out and followed him, He's following that angel. And wist not that it was true, which was done by the angel, but he thought that he saw a vision. So now, not only was he woke up pretty hard, remember, he's a hard sleeper. He must have been a dreamer too, because he thought that he was still asleep and wondered, am I still dreaming? Have you ever got up in the morning or night, anytime? You go about doing something and then you wonder, did I really do that? Is that real? Is this really happening? Am I dreaming? Well, that's what Peter's wondering. He's saying, is this really happening? I hope it's not just a dream. Verse 10, when they were past the first and the second ward, so the first and second set of guards there, they came unto the iron gate that leadeth unto the city, which opened to them of his own accord. Does anybody remember when automatic doors first came out? I can remember being a boy and Walmart in Milton first got the open door that opens by the sensor. I thought it was awesome. I would go and stand in front of it and it would open up, and then I'd run to the side and it would close. And I'd do it again. I thought that was the coolest thing. This has to be the first automatic opening door. Nobody had to do anything. They just go up to it. It opens all by itself. Peter probably thought that was cool too, but again, am I still dreaming? But it opened of its own accord, and they went out, and they passed on through one street, and forthwith the angel departed from him. So once they're out of jail, the angel's gone. The angel's gone. And again, maybe Peter at this point is saying, maybe I'm still sleeping. Is any of this real? I'm going to wake up in just a minute. I'm still going to be locked to these guys. And then in the morning, maybe I'll be killed. But it doesn't say he was worried about that. It doesn't say he was expecting that, because he was expecting, again, the unexpected. He trusted God, and he was not yet an old man. He goes on in verse 11 to say, and when Peter was come to himself, he's got his right mind now. He's awake. He's had a couple cups of coffee, or maybe he went and got some shots of espresso. He's awake, and he's alone on the streets because the angel's already left him. And he said to himself, once he come to himself, now I know of a surety that the Lord hath sent his angel, and that the Lord hath delivered me out of the hand of Herod and from all the expectation of the people of the Jews. You see that? Do you see that? If anybody's reading King James this morning, it says, from all the expectation of the people of the Jews. You have to remember, expect the unexpected. You see, the Jews were expecting that Herod was going to take care of Peter. Herod was expecting that he'd get up in the morning and he'd be able to follow through with his plans. Peter's still hanging out, right where I had told the guards to take him to. And I'm going to be able to kill him, and I'm going to gain more favor. I'm going to be able to please more people. I'm going to be the hero of the day. It didn't work out like that. Their expectations were wrong, because God had a bigger plan. Because remember, there's people praying for Peter. Verse 12 goes on to say, and when he had considered the thing, so he's sitting there thinking about that, about how the Lord is the one that delivered him. The Lord is the one that sent the angel, and the Lord is the one that's going to make him free. When he had considered the thing, he came to the house of Mary, the mother of John, whose surname was Mark, where many were gathered together praying. So they're having a prayer meeting for Peter in Mary's house. And they've been praying, what's the word say, without ceasing for him. So that's how we can know this prayer meeting is about Peter. And they're all there. The early church, they're all gathered together, and they think Peter's about to be put to death. Peter's still locked up in the prison. They don't know anything that's transpired that night. They went to work. They came home. They probably ate a little dinner. Then they went to the prayer meeting. And they've been sitting there praying for Peter all night long. And now it's the late hours of the night. And there comes a knock at the gate. What's it say? They were there praying. In verse 13, and as Peter knocked at the door of the gate, a damsel came to hearken, named Rhoda. Now, y'all remember I asked y'all if you liked movies. And I told you there was all kind of different genres here. We've already seen action and adventure. We've seen the dramas for sure. There's a little comedy in here too. And I find this next part comical. Because Peter's standing here at the gate. And he's banging. Knock, knock, let me in. It's the middle of the night. Let me in. I want to come into your prayer meeting. And then a damsel, she gets up, she leaves from the prayer meeting. I'm sure it was much like probably a cell phone ringing in here. What happens when a cell phone rings in here during service? Well, first everybody tries to ignore it. It's going to stop in just a minute. And then it keeps ringing. And people are looking around like, is anybody going to answer that? And eventually somebody gets up and gets it, and everybody's relieved. Well, I'm sure similar things were happening here. Knock, knock at the door. They're all praying. Yeah, whoever it is, they'll go away. Knock, knock, knock. Knock, knock, knock. And it just keeps on knocking and knocking. And everybody's wondering, all right, anybody going to get the door? And they're probably not really listening to the prayers. They're probably not thinking about the prayers that they're making. It's just, somebody get that door. It's like a phone ringing. Suddenly, a girl named Rhoda gets up, and Rhoda means rose. She gets up and she arose and she goes to the door and she opens the door. And what happens when she looks out there, she sees. When she knew, verse 14, when she knew Peter's voice, she opened not the gate for gladness. But she ran in and told how Peter stood before the gate. So she recognizes Peter's voice when she goes outside. She's standing at the gate. She hears him. She knows it's Peter. She believes it's Peter. But she doesn't open the door. He's knock, 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 knock. I just got out of prison. Somebody help me out. And she's so excited she runs back in. Now, has anybody ever had this happen? Where somebody was so excited they just, forgot what was going on and they just went on about their business? I have. It was weird. Weird. And so that's what's happening here. This is that comical situation I was talking about. Rose, she goes to the door and, it's Peter, so exciting. And she goes back into the prayer meeting. She's like, hey, everybody, guess who's at the gate? I know we've been sitting here all night long. We've been praying, and we've been praying for days for Peter. And we've been praying, Lord, help Peter. Give Peter comfort. Give Peter strength. Lord, please protect Peter. We don't want to lose our friend. We lost James, Lord. We don't want to lose Peter. And they're praying and praying and praying. And in comes Rose. Hey, Peter's at the gate. And they probably think she's a blooming idiot. That's what it says. That's exactly what it says. Verse 15 says, and they said unto her, Rose, you're a blooming idiot. No, it doesn't say that. It says, and they said unto her, thou art mad. You're crazy. It's not Peter. Look, sit down. We're praying for Peter. Stop talking nuts. You're out of your head. Peter's not out there. Now sit down and be quiet. We're praying for Peter. But she constantly affirmed that it was even so. Then they said, okay, listen, if there's anything out there, if there's anybody out there that even looks like Peter, it's not Peter. It's his angel. It's his angel. Now, they believed that when you died, you were visited, oftentimes your friends or your family were visited by an angel who would give you the message that your friend or your family member had died. This was an old Jewish belief, an old Jewish thought. Remember, and we haven't got there yet, and so I hope I don't spoil it for him. Pastor Gordon's teaching us through Luke right now. In Luke chapter 24, the same thing happens, but with Jesus. Jesus dies. He comes back just like he said he would. And he goes to his friends. And they don't believe him. They think he's a ghost. They think he's an angel, something. But it can't be Jesus. Remember this? Luke chapter 24. We'll get there in a couple weeks, I'm sure. But that's what's happening. Oh, it's not Peter. It's an angel. It's a ghost. You're crazy, Rose. Verse 16. It says, but Peter continued knocking. So he's still sitting out there knocking at this gate. All this is going on, and he's still out there knocking. And when they had opened the door, and they saw him, what's it say? They were astonished. That doesn't sound right. We've been praying for Peter. And many people would say, well, they didn't have enough faith. They didn't have enough faith. They've been praying, but they didn't have enough faith. Because they were astonished. They weren't exactly expecting the unexpected, were they? If they were praying with enough faith, well, then they would have expected Peter to knock on the gate and to come on in. But they didn't expect that. But really, if we think about ourselves, God hears our prayers too. And how many of our prayers, I'm going to be honest, and you can be honest this morning or not, I don't care. But I'm going to be honest, how many of our prayers, I know how many of mine are made, but I don't know that I really believe that what I'm praying is going to happen. I don't fully believe it, at least. I really want it to. I hope that it does. But that won't happen. But I'm going to pray it because I'm supposed to and because I'm told to. You might run into the same thing. You might encounter the same thing when you're praying. Maybe we don't completely believe it's going to happen. That's okay. We're told we only need how much faith? Just a mustard seed. And back then a mustard seed was the tiniest of seeds. Nowadays there's even smaller ones. We've got hybrid seeds and all kind of all that stuff. They can make small ones. But a small seed, just a small speck. Think about it. That's all the faith we need. So when I'm praying, when they're praying, that's all that you need. But when that gate opens up and it's Peter standing there, it says they were astonished. They should have been expecting it. They should have been expecting it. Goes on to say in verse 17, as we begin to see that not only does God see our trouble, care about our trouble, not only does he hear our prayers and care about our prayers, care enough to answer our prayers, but he also fights our battles. Why would he do that? Because he loves us. Because he loves us. Verse 17 says, but he, so now they're astonished. They're surprised. It's really Peter. Okay, Peter's here. Verse 17 says, but he, beckoning unto them with the hand to hold their peace. So now that they are astonished, now that they understand that it's Peter, they're pretty excited. They're jumping up and down. They're excited. Peter, 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 it's you. Peter, we've been praying for you, buddy. I didn't stop praying for you. Yeah, they weren't really praying, but I was praying for you, Peter, and God answered my prayers. And he looks at him and he says, shh, hush, keep your voice down. It's the middle of the night. And I'm an escapee. I had a big prison break back there. Pretty soon they're going to find out. They're going to come looking for me, and they're going to be looking for you too if you're harboring me. So keep your voice down. I get it. You're excited. He said, hold your peace. And then he declared unto them how the Lord had brought him out of the prison. Has the Lord brought you out of any prisons? Has he brought you out of a prison of financial debt? Or maybe a prison, maybe given a sentence where the medical report wasn't going to be so well. And then the Lord turned that around for you? Has he brought you out of a real prison or a real jail? Has he released you from prison of addiction? There's all kind of prisons that we can be put in or that we can put ourselves into. Remember, the enemy just wants to enslave us, to keep us prisoner until he eventually can have us die, just like Herod wanted for Peter. The Lord's got other plans. And so now Peter stands here and he's like, all right, keep your voice down. Let me tell you what has happened. I know you're excited, but let me tell you, this wasn't your prayers as much as it was my Lord. He showed up and he allowed me to be set free. Now, go. I was sent. I was told to arise and to go quickly. Now I'm sending you. Go. Tell other people about this good thing that has happened. If God has let you escape, if he has helped you in any way escape from any prisons, don't just stand there. Go. And do like Peter's doing. Go tell somebody. Not about what you've done, but about what God has done for you. You know what that's called? It's our testimony. It's the greatest thing we've got. It's the only thing people care about because they don't care what John's got to say, but if they could see what John is saying is true, by the way John lives out his testimony, then they might want to listen a little closer to what allowed my testimony. What broke me out of that prison? It was God. What set me free? It was Jesus Christ. And so now Peter stands here and he's telling them, go, show these things unto James. Who's James? James's head was cut off, right? No, this is not James, the son of Zebedee. This is James, the other disciple. This is James the Less, also known as James, son of Alphaeus. So that's who he says. He says, look, I know you're excited. The Lord has done this. Go show these things. Go tell James about this and go tell the rest of the church. Go tell the rest of the brethren. And he departed and he went into another place. Where did he go? I don't know. I don't care. James went on doing what he was supposed to be doing. Peter went on doing what he was supposed to be doing. And as Peter went on, we don't hear too much more about Peter. In chapter 15, there will be a little bit about Peter, but not really much left in the Acts of the Apostles. But we know it didn't end there. He continued on with what the Lord wanted him to do. And that's exactly what he wants for all of us. Continue on with what he wants you to do. So he went into another place. And verse 18 says, now as soon as it was day, there was no small stir among the soldiers. I'm sure there wasn't. You remember they were changing guard shifts, and I'm sure at that next guard change, somebody got scared. They might have dozed off. Who knows? Maybe they were asleep when all this happened. Who knows? But to think about having to explain that to the next guard shift, and then to think about having to explain this to Herod. Hey, that guy you gave us that you wanted to kill in the morning, he's not here. He's gone. And he was chained to me. I'm sorry. Please forgive me. I don't think it works like that. And they knew it didn't work like that. Because at the time, if you were put in charge of soldiers, if you were a soldier put in charge of prisoners and you allowed your prisoners to escape, guess what? You got whatever their penalty was. Peter's penalty was death. That was his sentence. So now that rolls over. It's kind of like those rollover minutes with your cell phones. This is similar to that, but completely different. So now that sentence is going to roll over onto these soldiers. And so there was no small stir about this, about what had become of Peter. And verse 19 says, and when Herod had sought for him in the morning, and he found him not, he examined the keepers, he talked to them, he questioned them, where's Peter? And they couldn't provide an answer. He got angry. It says that he commanded that they should be put to death. So they get put to death. And it goes on to say, and when he went down from Judea to Caesarea, and there abode. So he's angry. He's upset. He had big plans. He He's been waiting for this all throughout Passover. I can't wait for this to end so that I could put Peter to death. And now he's gone. And these guys let him go, these knuckleheads. Kill them. I'm going to the beach. I'm stressed out. I need to go to the beach. So he goes down to Caesarea, down to the beach. And there he stayed. And it says, and Herod was highly displeased with them of Tyre and Sidon. Now, this is an area in Lebanon, these two cities, Tyre and Sidon. They're up in the area of Lebanon. And so we don't really know what the reasoning is here, but Herod he's mad at them. And they're upset that he's upset, because now the way that it was originally worded, well, Herod wanted to go to war. And so now they're upset about this, and so they send forth their emissaries. It says, but they came with one accord to him. And having made Blastus, the king's chamberlain, their friend, they desired peace. So Blastus, the king's, you think about it, the chamberlain back then, he was a guy who would tuck the king into bed at night. His job was the bedroom and the household. Make sure everything was in order for the king. And so the king goes to bed at night. I'm sure he was also in charge of talking to the king until he went to sleep. He had the ear of the king. And they were probably pretty good friends on some level. They knew things about each other. But he was an important guy, this Blastus. Heck of a name. But they went to him. And they're talking to Blastus, and they say, well, we know that you've got the ear of the king. Maybe as he's going to sleep, you could maybe negotiate for us and let him know, look, we don't want him mad at us. We don't really want to go to war. Maybe you could try to make peace for us. And so after they go to Blastus in this midnight deal at, I don't know, Trump Tower by the sea, having this collusion meeting. Their country, it was said, was nourished by the king's country. So that's why they're so upset. Remember, way back in Old Testament times, Solomon made a deal with the kings there in Lebanon. He said, you send us trees, those cedar trees, and I'll take care of your food. They couldn't grow very much food up there. And so Tyre and Sidon, they're worried. I don't want the king mad at me. We like to eat. And so they sought out peace. And so then, verse 21 says, and upon a set day for Herod, he got all dressed up in his Brooks Brothers suits. He put on that Armani suit, shined his shoes, and he goes out and he sits down on the throne. And he was going to have a rally. Make Herod great again rally. He gave them an oration. He made a speech to them. And, I'm large, I'm in charge. And you're going to know it. I've got on my fancy clothes. It says he dressed up in royal apparel. And I'm going to let you know, you need me. I don't need you so much. I'm the boss, applesauce. And he goes out to make an oration unto them. And it says in verse 22, and the people gave a shout, saying, it is the voice of a God and not of a man. It is the voice of a God and not of a man. That ain't so good. Remember, Herod was trying to keep the laws of the Jewish people. He was trying to keep the commands. He was trying to honor their religious holidays. He was trying his best to be kosher. But he forgot something. Because it doesn't say that he stopped them, that he corrected them. Don't talk about me like that. There's only one God. No, he sat there and he soaked it all up. He loved it. They're talking about me. Look at me. It is a God and not a man. He forgot something. He forgot the first commandment. There shouldn't be any other gods. And now he's accepting that they're making him their God. In essence saying, yeah, I agree. I agree. He didn't correct them, and it came back to bite him real quick. Because as they're yelling out, it's a voice of a God and not of a man. It says, and immediately, verse 23, the angel of the Lord smote him. Wait a minute. That angel likes to smite people. This is the same way that it's worded all the way back in verse 7 when he showed up to smite Peter. But you know, one smite was to get somebody up. The other is to take him down. And that's what's happening here in verse 23. Immediately the angel of the Lord smote him because he gave not God the glory. And it goes on to say, and he was eaten of worms. Yeah, ugh. And gave up the ghost. Now it doesn't say that he died. He gave up the ghost, and then he was eaten of worms. It said he was eaten of worms, and he gave up the ghost. Now, we don't know anything more than that. And there's been lots of people that speculate about this and that and what it could be and what it could mean. Some people believe it was a tapeworm. Josephus, the Jewish historian, he believed this. And he pointed out something else. That Herod the Great died this same way. Grandpa, that wanted to kill Jesus and everybody else, Josephus records that he died of being eaten of the worms also. I don't know what it is. I don't know what these worms are. I don't really care what the worms are. This is what I recognize when I read this. He failed to give glory to God and accepted all for himself. There was no humility in him, but he was full of pride. These worms of pride ate him alive. And that's exactly what happens because, well, as we're told in Proverbs chapter 16, verse 18, what happens? Pride goeth before a fall. That's what happened here to Herod. This great king could have been a great king. But he decided he was going to come after God. He was going to come after God's people. And he was going to make himself a god. But the Lord saw a different plan. He said he saw that this was an enemy of the people of God that had to be handled. And remember, nothing is hidden from God. He sees it. He hears it. And he saw this enemy. And so he took vengeance into his own hands as he's promised us in his word that he would do. And he smote and knocked down and took out and let the worms eat up Herod. He took care of their enemies because God fights our battles. Now your battle might not be big, might be small today, but you've got a big battle coming. But even then, there's nothing to worry about. You see, you can rest and sleep in perfect peace. Why? Because the Lord's going to fight your battles. God is going to fight your battles because he hears your prayers and he sees your trouble. Nothing is hidden from him. Verse 24 goes on to say, but the word of God grew and multiplied. I find that a key verse in this entire chapter. Because from the very beginning, they've been trying to snuff out the Christians. Snuff out the people of God. Put them down, kill them, lock them up. Didn't succeed. Tried to snuff out the gospel being spread. But it didn't work. Because the word of God continued to grow and it multiplied. And the last verse says, and Barnabas and Saul returned from Jerusalem when they had fulfilled their ministry, and they took with them John, whose surname was Mark. So not only is the word of God growing and multiplying, but his people, his ministers, are continuing to be multiplied as well. And so as we know, they'll continue to go, the church will continue to grow, and people will be saved, and lives will be changed, and fast forward through history, and you find us here today. Here we are. And I just have to ask, are you expecting the unexpected? You should be. You should be. You should be expecting the unexpected, because I can tell you there's a lot of people who never expected me to stand right here. There's a lot of people that have expected the worst for you. But God sees all, hears all, and He's going to take care of all. Not only will He take care of my enemies, but He promises to see everything through to the end. To the end. He's going to see it through. And so this can be my expectation. I can expect that my God's going to take care of me. You can expect that your God is going to take care of you. Amen? Let's pray.